The only thing worse than a serial killer are two serial killers working together and having no conscience. One being a narcissistic psychopath and the other being a brutal, smart killer. And in the end, different desires would drive the city of Los Angeles to have 5 months of straight fear. This is the story of Kenneth and Angelo, the Los Angeles, California Hillside Stranglers. Imagine you live in one of the biggest cities in the United States, and there's an active killer on the loose, does not mind leaving the bodies of the victims right in the open for everyone to see, almost as a calling card. In 1977 of October that year, women would disappear, but before they were even reported missing, most of them would end up on the side of hills, strangled, nude, experimented on, cleaned, and even having their clothes put back on. Needless to say, women around Los Angeles were terrified. The two men that would cause so much havoc and show no mercy and do unspeakable things for 5 months to women in late 1977 into early 78 were Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Bono. The two men were very different when it came to personalities, and very different when it came to kidnapping and cleaning up the crime. When breaking down the personalities of the two men, you see very different traits in each of the men. Kenneth Bianchi had a very troubled life from birth to the day he was incarcerated for the rest of his life. Kenneth would be given up by his mother as a baby. From there, he would be adopted. Even as a child, his adopted parents would say that Kenneth had very weird, strange habits and was a compulsive liar, even at a very young age. Before Kenneth would move to Los Angeles to live with his older cousin Angelo, while Kenneth was growing up in Rochester, New York, he would try several times to become a police officer, but to no end would fail each time. Although he would land a job as a security guard, although he would lose the job due to stealing the jewelry at the store he was protecting. As Kenneth's life was falling apart, it was recommended that he go live with his cousin. Now with Kenneth moving to Los Angeles to live with his older cousin, who somewhat had his life together, who owned his own business, Kenneth's cousin went by the name Angelo Bono Jr. Now this is where the story with the two men coming together, two worlds colliding, and forming and gelling into something of a nightmare. Kenneth was known to have very passive-aggressive behavior, the behavior of a psychopath, of a narcissist. These were all very strong behavioral patterns in Kenneth. Angelo, on the other hand, was a very street-smart, very big ego-driven personality. Now Angelo, being the older cousin, already well late into his 40s, Angelo's past life was full of crime, 2 marriages, 8 children with 3 different women, and a very long rap sheet of abuse on women. Now with Kenneth living with his older cousin, Angelo, their relationship would move very rapid and very aggressively, and getting straight down to the nuts and bolts of how their relationship would work. Now as the two men were living together, they would soon find women that were down on their luck and force them to become prostitutes. Now with Angelo and Kenneth becoming somewhat rookie pimps, very quick and very abrupt, the relationship would progress extremely fast. And before the end of 1977, they would strangle their first victim, Yolanda Washington. The first 3 murders that Angelo and Kenneth would commit came very fast. Looking at their first murder of Yolanda Washington, this murder came more as a rage, settling a score, and acting in revenge. The chain of events that would occur to lead to Yolanda's death were very unsettling. With Angelo and Kenneth having girls that they were pimping out, their first girls would eventually run away from them. The problem was, that was their income, and they would need to find more girls very fast. A woman named Deborah Noble would sell Angelo and Kenneth a trick list. The names that were supposed to be on this list were men that visited prostitutes on a recurring basis. The problem with this list is that it was fake, and it would lead to someone's death, and that someone was Yolanda. Now how Yolanda got wrapped up in this was due to the fact that she was with Deborah when they delivered the list. On October 17th, 1977, Angelo and Kenneth would go out looking for Deborah, although they would not find Deborah. The problem is, they would find Yolanda. Now with this first slaying of Yolanda, This is the first time the two men would act out with actually taking someone's life together. Yolanda was picked up by the two men. She was tied, taken advantage of, and strangled to death somewhere that night. It's not certain how long Angelo and Kenneth had her that night, but it is known that they tortured her and took out their rage on her. Her body would be found naked, but something very curious was different about this. The police could see that there was faint marks around Yolanda's neck, wrist, and ankles where she had been tied. But they could also tell that there was no blood on her and that she had been cleaned from head to toe. Someone had taken her, murdered her, and cleaned her body before disposing of it. Now that Kenneth and Angelo have taken their first life, they will be looking for victims day by day, week by week, for the next 4 months. They have become addicted to kidnapping, torturing, and killing women. Angelo and Kenneth would use the same technique that their neighbor to the north would use, which was Ted Bundy. Kenneth and Angelo would act as policemen. They would even go as far to be in their vehicle and get up beside their victims, waving a badge and telling the young lady to pull over. This is how they would get the attention and deceive most of the women they would kidnap. The most heinous crime of them all that Angelo and Kenneth would commit was the kidnapping and assault of a 14 and 12-year-old girl. This would be unusual and a first for Angelo and Kenneth. They had not attacked anyone this young before. On November 13th, 1977, on a Sunday, Kenneth and Angelo would be driving in their car. They would spot the two girls getting on a bus, and they would follow them. As the bus eventually stopped at its destination, Kenneth and Angelo would pull up in their vehicle. A witness would later tell police they saw the two girls get off the bus. They would walk over to a large, two-door sedan and talk to a man on the passenger side of the vehicle. Kenneth and Angelo would be acting as police officers once again. The girls were young. Remember, they were only 12 and 14. Very easily scared and manipulated by older men claiming to be police officers. Kenneth and Angelo would eventually talk to the girls, more or less frighten them to where they would get in the vehicle. That would be the last time the girls were ever seen alive by anyone besides Kenneth and Angelo. The men would take them back to Angelo's home, and this is where the next 5 days of these two young girls' lives would be a living nightmare. The sad and heartlessness of Angelo and Kenneth were unbelievable with these two girls. They would keep them for 5 days, tied up, and assault them day and night. These were just two innocent schoolgirls on their way home to return to their families, to have dinner and relax with their mother and father, and fall asleep in their bed. When Angelo and Kenneth would become tired with the girls, they would strangle them to death. They would literally take them 4 miles from Angelo's home and dump them on a hillside right next to the Dodgers Stadium, on a hillside that was constantly covered in trash. The girls would remain there for days. Their bodies would be in direct sunlight. By the time the girls were found, decomposition had set in heavily due to animals, bugs, and weather conditions. The depravity of taking two young girls, keeping them and torturing them, these are barbaric and evil upon all means. This crime is one of the worst that Angelo and Kenneth will commit. It is sad and heartless, brutal upon all means, and just 1 week later, they will take another girl and do the same thing to her. They will take torture to an even further level by injecting her with cleaning supplies. Angelo and Kenneth are moving at a very fast pace for a serial killer. Most serial killers are stalking and looking for their next victim. Angelo and Kenneth are doing that, but they're almost taking a girl every 2 weeks, if not a week. When talking about this crime, it hurts even more to know that they were just two helpless young girls. Sandra and Dolores had not experienced so many things in life, had not tasted so many things of life. They had to be beside each other as they were tortured, taken advantage of, for 5 days. Friends, I say all this to make you and let you see the brutality and the disgust of Angelo and Kenneth, the Hillside Stranglers. Kenneth and Angelo will continue murdering young women. Their crimes will get even more brutal, taking more chances, and eventually split apart, and in the end, one will be caught and sell out his accomplice. As the story starts to wrap up and the murders stop, Kenneth will move away, try to raise a child with his wife. The problem is, Kenneth cannot stop killing. He will take the life of 2 more women, and in his sloppy, compulsive, lack of attention to detail like Angelo, he will be caught the next day. Friends, until we talk about Kenneth and Angelo again, remember, be careful who you take rides from.